So how do you learn to build a crowdsourced organization? You have a couple choices. You can either travel around and see a group of new startups that have been using crowdsourcing since their very first day of operation. Or you can spend 2 weeks on your family farm and learn how to deal with the County Labor Bureau, which is in its own way a form of crowdsourcing. In either case, you learn a couple lessons. Crowdsourcing is about process. It's not about organization. It's about communication and point of contact. It is about how you establish and keep a history of the information that you need and that your crowd will need in order to do the jobs properly.
In these activities, I began to appreciate that we really need to think about our management structure and what our organization is doing to manage, to communicate ideas, and particularly to teach the workers what they need to know to get the job done. We have traditionally thought about organizing crowdsourcing within a greater business or other institution by looking at the corporate structure chart. I, among many, have been guilty of doing this. We look at this chart and we identify some unit that seems to be a candidate for crowdsourcing. We then lop it off and then replace it with a crowdsourced unit. At least that's what we tell people.
But if you start with organization, you're largely missing the point. Crowdsourcing is about process. So the proper way to think about crowdsourcing is not to think about your organization and how you insert crowdsourcing into it, but how do you think about your process and organize it around a crowd that will help control the flow of information and get the work done.
So we will start with this chart, which represents a typical simple process. It has a start, it has an end, and 5 steps in between. We look at that and we identify 2 steps that have the potential to be crowdsourced. One might involve microtasking, the other macrotasking, for example. We then build the crowdsourcing processes. We get our workers, we get the process set up, and then we connect those crowdsourcing activities into our process, and we then modify our organization to handle that. The point that impressed me, both working on the farm when I had day laborers helping me clean up the farm and do some various repair activity, and also in the companies that I visited, is that the management structure, the way that you interact with these workers and these processes changes. When we convert a step of a process into a crowdsourced step, we turn a step into a management step that we connect with the crowd. And in that process, we do some obvious things. We need to set up specifications. We need to set up ways of monitoring the activity to make sure that the work is being done well. And we have to set up an assessment process, a way of knowing that the work is complete and that we can put it into the rest of the process. But we have to do one more thing that yet again pulls some of the traditional labor activities into management. We have to pull in the history and lessons of the process that the workers often keep. In a profound way, crowdsourcing can do away with history, can remove from us a repository of ideas and lessons that people get from working. So when we set up a crowdsourcing process, we not only push management deep into the process, but we also require that management to recall the history, to grasp all the lessons learned that may have been passed from one to another via informal means and methods. They become teachers and communicators as well as managers.
So the question is not how do we build a crowdsourced organization, but how do our management skills move towards the crowd? We discover that management starts to become very deeply embedded in the crowdsourced process. It includes how we define, monitor, and assess the projects that we have created and that we are using. It also requires us to keep track of the history, the stories that keep our organization on track over time, the best way of doing things, the fundamental cause behind our ideas, the goals for which we are striving. This is how you build a crowdsourced organization. I'm David Allen Grier, podcasting for the Daily Crowdsource. You can reach me at dagrier@jaggy.com. Our music comes from musicalley.com, and we thank them. And I'll catch you next week. Take care.